if you don't have a caregiving plan, and it sounds like, I'm lecturing, it may sound like, I'm pontificating, it may
Yeah.
sound like, I'm telling, and I am, but the thing is, if you wait for a caregiving issue, it's already over as far as the drama, and the crisis. It's there. Then the question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you know?
Welcome to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. I'm your host, LaMont Leavitt. In a world overflowing with noise, confusion, and distraction, we're here to cut through the clutter and explore bold, unique paths to a longer, healthier, and more vibrant life. Through candid conversations with business leaders, wellness experts, industry pioneers, and innovators, we'll uncover insights to help you discover your own personalized, unique approach to thriving. Tune in, trust the compass of wisdom within, and find your fountain of vitality. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is LaMont Leavitt. I am the host of Fountain of Vitality podcast, and with us we have Raymond Lavine. He's with Lavine LTC Benefits, and we're excited to hear from him and learn from him as it relates to long-term care planning, and how he got into that business in the first place. And I'm sure he's got some great stories to share with us today. Raymond, thank you for being here.
Good morning, Lamont.
Well, tell me about first of all, how did you get into doing what you do?
Most of my career has been in financial services. I've been in mortgage banking. I've been in banking. I've been in insurance, various forms of insurance. But for the last decade and a half, I focused on long-term care benefits. And so people say, well, why don't you just do, all kinds of insurance benefits? What's so special about long-term care benefits? And that's another podcast of, all the differences. But the personal reason is I didn't want to do everything else. I didn't want to do annuities and all these other things, because it's like in the statistics curve, is that the more things you do, the less competent you are in a lot of things. And yet, here's the specific reason, is that long-term care benefits, think of it as, I'm not your primary dentist. I'm not your primary attorney. I'm not your primary doctor. Why? Because there's just so much to know about long-term care benefits that to do other things, that I wouldn't have as much fun doing what I do than if I, were trying to do, 7 other things. And the other reason is because, because you have your podcast about health and the variations of health, is that there are times where the primary doctor just doesn't know how to diagnose it. It's just not what, they can know the main things. We have a friend who has a digestive issue, and has been through now 3 states to try to find somebody that can diagnose the issue. I can also say personally that our doctor has also digestive issues. Anyway, the point is that this is what I do, and I spend my time each day to either have conversations with people, or to learn all the ways that it's changing, and also because the way caregiving has evolved is changing. Let me tell you what I'm thinking about this, is that when I was growing up, and maybe when you were growing up, you had, a support system. A lot of people lived in the same community. And
Yeah.
then, and also our working lives and how we're making money and working for companies. It's all changed. The 21st century, it's all changed. And so the reason I do what I do is I believe and I advocate that people need to have a caregiving plan, a way to say that we are the most important investment. I believe the most important investment, not your car, but yourself and your family. I mean, if you have a family, that's what I live for. I live for my family, and I want good things for them.
Yeah.
Made certain promises to them about what my responsibilities would be, and they've made commitments of what their responsibilities are to me because we're a family. That's what it means is familiar. Long and so that's why I do what I do. That's why I advocated to people. And what we talked about before, you were talking about, your family, and I said, well, how are you planning, your caregiving? And he
Yeah.
said, well, I'm working on it. So let me just stop there and let you could ask, because I can go on and on about all the sub levels because sometimes I think that's my thinking. But anyway, let me just stop there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people I know are dealing with parents that are either aging or starting to struggle. And a lot of times there's not a lot of communication to even know if they have any long-term care type help. But the one thing that is interesting is siblings need to come together to help figure out how to support the parent. And then you may have one or two siblings that feel differently than you. And if the parent already has Alzheimer's or dementia, you have to come together as a team to in your family to help get them set up and taken care of when they can't live in your home anymore. So that's just one example of it. And but I do see a lot of stress created in these scenarios where they've got to take care of a parent and they're trying to also run their own families and take care of all their needs and maintain their jobs. What are some recommendations that you would give to people that are struggling with these kinds of issues to start with?
It depends on, the family. There are issues and there's sub issues you were talking about, if somebody is already in a caregiving situation, you're already in a situation of you have to make, decisions. My experience, not only personally, but also in data about it, is that if you don't have a caregiving plan, and it sounds like, I'm lecturing, it may sound like, I'm pontificating, it may
Yeah.
sound like, I'm telling, and I am, but the thing is, if you wait for a caregiving issue, it's already over as far as the drama, and the crisis. It's there. Then the question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you know? And this is where your endorphins and your amygdala are confused. You're overwhelmed because a lot of things are happening with not only to those that need caregiving, but who's going to be responsible for it. So if you have a plan in advance, you have the conversation, you find out, families are different dynamics. Some are great families, you've talked about things. A lot of people don't have the conversation. Why?
No.
Well, because it's uncomfortable. And look, families bring out secrets, and if it's okay in your pot, I mean, there are secrets.
Yeah.
People have sometimes another family. Some people have children that weren't brought up. People have other relationships that haven't come up. So there are a lot of things, or their money, if it isn't that, it's money issues, depending on the generation. Some people say, I don't want to talk about my finances. It could be because maybe they have a great deal of finances, but then they don't want to tell their kids because then it may be that. It may be that they haven't planned well and they don't want to, admit or have the conversation. I didn't do that well. I didn't save up as much. So there are a lot of, hidden issues where people feel embarrassed. What or because of the family dynamics, people don't also want to bring in other people. Say, I don't want to bring in strangers. Well, sometimes depending on what the issues are, you may need to. It may be helpful because of your relationship within the family. That bring in a gerontologist, bring in people that have a psychologist, or if you have faith, bring in a faith leader that you like, because I mean they deal with these things all, every day. Is the people that you have confidence in and you trust, and could say, look, maybe I can't run the meeting, so I'll have somebody else run the meeting, and that has experience how to conduct it, and because it isn't oh, 10 years ago, you were mean to me. Okay, so now I need so now I need you. Um, there are these are some of the practical things that people need to. Sometimes you have to maybe it's a 19. You have to suck it up, meaning
Yeah.
you have to just say, look, maybe you may think that it's embarrassing, but it's more embarrassing when there are three things that I say, about caregiving. One is that people want attention, and I'll get back to the thought. People want attention. People don't want to feel invisible, and you sure don't want to feel vulnerable. And these are all the things that happen, within caregiving. And when you have the family together, is that everybody is feeling something. Uh, um, and the other fact is most of us are not experienced or trained in caregiving. I'm not. I didn't. I mean,
Right.
I probably had more sex education classes, if you remember, or driver's education, but nobody was going to talk in high school about caregiving. Uh,
No.
but caregiving happens everywhere, every time, every age. What do I mean by that? Caregiving can be if you have family that have children or spouses that have a chronic or pre-existing condition. It could be neurological, it could be autism, it can be cancer, it can be stroke. There is no, age specific. We always think of caregiving as you're old. Well, yes, but there's a lot of trust me, there's a lot of caregiving going on within families of people younger ages. An example would be you have children that have not made interesting life choices, or they've indulged in things where they are in they're going through rehabilitation, or they've gone through whatever. But if you have some health or addiction issue, usually it becomes a lifelong issue, and
Yeah.
you just never. And there are also generations now that are having to live together, or grandparents that are now back to being parents, or families because of economic circumstances or life situations where families are living together. So there are a lot of there. And so if the assumption is, well, if somebody's living with me, family, children, if something happens, they'll be responsible. Well, is it really reasonable? I don't like to. There's a negotiating thing where they say, never say, I want it to be fair, or I want to split the difference. Not going to happen because I don't know. I don't know what fair means.
Yeah, and fair is so hard to interpret of, what someone's perception of fair is gonna be different for every individual, especially within a family.
Yeah. And so these are how to have the conversation. And if you don't know how, then hire people or bring in people that know how. And there's look, I Raymond Lavine, if there's something I don't know, then I always go to higher authority. I go to my wife, because if I think I have the most wonderful idea, I've thought it out, it's wonderful. And then I'll ask higher authority. Here's what I think. Now she is a wonderful, kind person, and she won't say that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But what she will give me is perspective.
A
Say,
different perspective, yeah.
have you thought about this? Or I have this perspective. So sometimes my wonderful idea that I think is sensational will then become a better plan because I've had the conversation. I've talked to higher, or I've talked to my daughter, who also has a good perspective.
Yeah, your own family can be your advisory board if you can let your ego down and open up to everyone's ideas, and sometimes it's just a matter of listening to what everyone's needs are and coming together with the right solution that works for the family. And there's
Well,
not an LTC
there's
in
more
place.
of that than listening. I'm a Chris Voss, Black Swan student of negotiating. And what I say is, I don't listen to people anymore. I don't. And what I mean by that is, I'm not listening. What I'm working to do is to understand. Because people, he could say, I get it. I'm listening. What am I listening to? I mean, I could be, I could be listening to a cartoon, or when people say, I hear you. What are you hearing? But
Right.
if I can say, to people that I'm having the conversation about caregiving is, tell me your story, or what have you thought about it, or if you had the situation, what would be your plan? Because I can tell them my story, and they're not they might say, oh, how interesting. It's like, when you're, with couples, and you're dining.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're dying to say, uh ask the question. You hope they'll talk for 20 minutes, because you really don't want to be engaged, or you really want to be on your phone. But my point is that, um, my interest is not to listen, but to understand, and to say, what is your perspective? What are you thinking about? Because I had somebody a couple of weeks ago. They said, well, I heard you on a podcast. I really don't want long-term care benefits, but I want to have the conversation. I said, why are we having this conversation? Anyways, it turned out they really wanted to have the conversation. And I just asked them questions to say, well, uh, why are we here? That's a fair question. Why are we here? It's like going to the doctor. Well, you go to the doctor because you want to find out, either you
What's
have,
wrong with you? Yeah.
you have an issue, or you're at your annual review. I mean, you don't go to a restaurant and say, "Why am I here?" I mean,
Yeah.
you have a reason. But sometimes people will do it to test me, or to find out whether they trust me, and that's really what it's about. Do I trust somebody to have a conversation about something that it is? Caregiving is as intimate, and I hope I can say, is as intimate as being intimate in a personal relationship. It's intimate anytime anybody's touching you, because we always think of caregiving as, we're eating, bathing, we're touching people, but caregiving is a lot more than that. You're being an
Right.
administrative assistant. You're being chief financial officer. You might be a chef. You might be the driver. You're the organizer. You're having to, depending on the situation, having to listen to doctors, or nurse practitioners, trying to figure out what it is they're talking about. You're having to think about, depending on the situation, your home modifications. What if you want to be at home? If you can't, then how are you going to pick a care center that that you want? And then that is even as more than if you stay at home. uh, what people worry about is care abuse, and also care attention. And what I mean by that is, care attention is ratio. Americans are impatient people. I am an impatient person, depending on the situation. And I'll go back to, you don't want to feel invisible, you don't want to feel vulnerable, and you want attention. And if you're waiting around for something to happen, and you're not well, or they need, your personality is going to suffer, and your mental health is going to suffer. And if you're at home, and if you have the home modifications, I mean, that's also part of it too. Somebody might say, um, well, if you have an upstairs bedroom, maybe maybe you need to have the bed downstairs, depending on the configuration of your house. I mean, that happened with my father when he broke his hip. They had a 2-story home, and so they had to put a bed in the dining room. That's where they
Yeah.
they moved the dining room. So my father was, in the dining room for 6 months. So these are all these decisions that you have to make. So if you have some sort of plan before that, and you have a plan, and I know this is going to shock you, and your listeners, is caregiving is also money. It is a monetary issue. Whether you own a plan, or you think that your own assets are going to pay for the plan, or there are other ways that you can fund it. Social services, you can sell life insurance, you can sell your life insurance and get funds. There are a number of ways to fund it. But one way or another, money is going to come into the conversation. I guarantee you, it is
Yeah.
not 100%, but it's 272% plus that money's going to come into it. And what I mean by that, it isn't just the moolah. It isn't whether the insurance company is paying or your assets are paying. Is that you're asking family and friends to, if they have to take their time, there's a cost to that, because if somebody has to give up, their career or go on sabbatical or go on part time, there is an immediate economic effect.
What would you say to the independent person that is really independent and their biggest issue is they don't want to be a burden on their family, to prepare in advance to not be a burden? What would you advice would you give to that person?
If you care about your family, then you have to then you're going to have to take responsibility to say, if I don't, well, here's the other way, and it's not so, is that, um, what responsibility, because families are responsibility. You have, it is either implied, or sometimes it's assumed, but that also can be annoying. But if you don't want to be, uh, 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 you know, with your family, whether you call it burden on your family, then you need to have a plan in advance to say, what do I want? Do I want to hire caregivers, professional caregivers? What do I want them to do? If I have family, then have the conversation. What do I want you to do? What do you know how to do? What are you willing to do? Um, and
Right.
how close are you? Are you across the street? Are you across the country? Because some if family members have to come and visit, uh, and these days, flying has this real. I mean, even when things are normal, it's still
It's
awful.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah, or driving. You wanna drive for an hour, and gas prices here are 5.60 a gallon. So, I mean, it's also it's the arithmetic, it's also economic. And there are no tax deductions for caregiving expenses. Let me say that again. There are no tax deductions for caregiving. And if you could find a line to say, "Hi, my caregiving expenses, that I put in 25,000 or 30,000. Let me know what line item that is." And I mean, elaborate on that, because when people say, "I'll think about it, or I'll do it later," you want to do that with your money. You always want your money working. Well, then invest in yourself to say, "I am going to do something for myself and my family," or as a couple, or as a spouse, or with long-term care benefits. Let me just also say, what sometimes I forget to say, is that if it's gender neutral, it could be, male, female, so if so long as you're in a domestic relationship, you can own a plan, and it does, deviate, or um, uh, um, so long as you have, a relationship. And even within, same-sex couples, they have families and they have kids, and so there is no difference. A family is a family, however you decide, whatever it is you believe, and you're asking people to take responsibility. Now let's go to, just for a moment, to the extreme. If people that are older and say, "Well, what my spouse or my partner will take care of me," how do you know they're going to be able to take care of you, and in what capacity? Because they may have their own health issues, and there are things that they can't that they can't do. And it's the same with your kids. I don't. Uh, uh, my wife and I have been married over 40 years. Do you really think I want to be a full, a caregiver for certain situations? I don't think so. So we have a plan. So we will hire people
Well,
to
that's good.
that I don't that it's not that I don't wanna do it, it's that I really don't wanna do it.
One thing that I've seen is I've seen a lot of kids that will have aging parents, and as the parents continue in age, sometimes the parents become a little more needy in their requests. They're retired, and they'll just say, "I just thought about that I want this certain medication done today," and they want their kids to go do it for them and pick it up because they can't drive, and then they
the kids try to tell their parents, here, if you can bunch all these requests up into one single thing and then go do them, it makes it easier. What happens, I think, I've seen some cases where parents become more needy. How can you help a person who's aging become a little more self-aware that maybe they're creating a strain on their children by those constant uh, badgering requests daily,
It's complicated.
right?
What I mean by that is observant. If you don't see your parents that often, then you have to be observant of their behavior. Does something seem not normal? Now, a lot of times families will find out what's going on if they have a family gathering. If they come to the home and they find out, hey, I opened up the refrigerator and why do you have this food that's 2017? Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
It's growing mold on it in the
yeah,
Tupperware.
yeah, or things just don't seem, the yard doesn't seem manicured. Do they are they dressing and bathing? Do they smell? I mean, there are a lot of things,
Their
whether
signs.
themselves or the home, that things don't seem right, or you're having the conversation and they're not tracking. And so a lot of times, if you're calling your parents, hi, how you doing? Oh, I'm great. Well, are you doing? Oh, yeah. I mean, people will, if you don't want me to say lie, people will fabricate, or people will defer. Uh, people because it is human nature that you don't really want to say I'm vulnerable or I'm slipping. Of course,
Right.
cognitive, you don't always, but that's where people need, families, if it, need to be aware, or sometimes that you need intervention where you're saying, uh, um, if you don't live by and the neighbor, to say, hey, have you noticed that the routine has changed? Have you noticed that when they go out that they don't look,
Aware.
yeah, they're going out, but they're in their slippers. I mean, there's so many stories about. So if the neighbors, to say, has the routine changed? Um, or again, the conversation, because adults, we have our personalities, and we always want to tell people that we are functioning. There is a transition from an active lifestyle to the warning lights go on. Don't believe me? It will. If you have a later model car, they have electronic. I mean, I have a new car now where if I'm not paying attention, the rotor will say, "Pay attention."
Right. Right.
Yeah, and it would be, look, it would be. You were telling me before we went on that you've had people that have technology that can diagnose things. I mean, that would be a great, if there could be an app to say, "Gee, are you slipping?" or something that would let us know that maybe we need caregiving, because um, if we're personally going through it, we may, we're not going to admit we can't do some of the things. Some people are. Some people, their personality or their lives, where they're okay with having somebody else do things. Other people is, I'm self-sufficient. I can do it. It's not a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen with like dementia and Alzheimer's, and when they're in their early stages, and you'll say, "Well, mom or dad, we talked about this like yesterday," and they'll go, "Oh yeah, I remember," but they don't really, but they want to put on a front that they did remember. So if you spend the time to talk with your parents, you'll start to catch when they get into loops and they really truly don't remember past conversations. You know,
Yeah.
if they
Well,
don't
it's
remember,
also how you have the conversation too, because again, this is a negotiating, where if you're telling, say, Lamont, you need to do this. Your personality, what do you mean I need to do this? What are you telling me? But if I say, Lamont, it seems like you need some help. It seems like, there are things I could do to help.
yeah. Yeah, 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 that's true. That's true. There's a lot in the approach too, because your parents will get defensive if they don't want the world to know they're slipping. So they try to maintain that position of I'm okay still. I'm okay still. But then as you start to see those things, you need to help. And
And there,
there's opportunities for your parents to be scammed more too as they get older.
that is also true of the phone calls, or if they're using the internet.
Right.
Say, "Hi, you're my friend," or somebody that you think you know. Yeah, you can be taken advantage, which is why one of the things that I do in my practice is it isn't just saying, "Hi, I'm going to talk to you about a long-term care plan, and we're going to figure out, what plan it is, and how, the premiums and the benefits and the."
Yeah.
I've expanded my thinking, not is to say it isn't just it isn't just the plan. It's what do you want your plan to do? And there are a lot of other things too. Is how organized are you with your financial records? How organized are you with your personal records? Do you have a digital platform that you can do it? Do you have a manual where you have? What I mean by that is you have your medical records, your social security, passwords, insurance files, legal documents. Do you have it in folders in a place that people can find it? Because one of the things, do I know? Can they find your social security number? Do
Right.
and also there are things that saying, well, let's say, oh yeah, I've got a power of attorney. I've got
It's more than it's the little. It's all the passwords and the logins and a lot. If I died tomorrow, I have an envelope or that says, okay, everything you need to know to run what I'm running about my life is in here, and vice
and
versa.
you have it in one envelope. LaMont, I'm impressed that I'm impressed that you can put your life in one envelope. Now that's
Yeah.
organization.
Very very small font. Anyway, but we need to get to that point. So it doesn't when a spouse does pass away, the other one already has enough grief to deal with. If they don't have to go through the process of how in the world am I going to fill in the blank, you need to minimize those stresses for that person in your life that's your significant other, and that's the best way you can do that, I think.
And also, I'll get back to home modifications. You say, well, look, doesn't Raymond really want to talk about insurance and long-term care benefits and caregiving? Is that it's a whole lot more of home modification. Also, things you can do to help your family, which I wish, lawyers and financial wealth advisors and other advisors is, to bring up these topic of, when you die, I mean, they will do a document, or your wealth advisor will help you build assets for your retirement, and depending on how large it is, for other things. But they also need to bring advocate caregiving planning, not caregiving self-funding, how are you going to fund it? I mean, really fund it. But it's also practical things of how much stuff do you have in your home? And most of us, have depending, some
So
people are journalists. Most of us,
are collectors, at least
exactly. So, these are things that incrementally is to say, look, if I'm at that point, how many dishes do I really need? Are my drawers, are they heavily stuffed with stuff? I often say, to myself, the most boring thing you can do is to clean out a drawer. The most boring. Why? Because there's a lot of stuff in there, and then you got to take it out, and then you have to decide what to put, what to put back. So, see, this is where if I have an assistant, to help me, it makes it more fun. And it's the same with, if you talk about burden. You want to have a burden on a family. Leave a home that hasn't been maintained.
and
Leave a home.
it's filled to the brim with just stuff. I mean, Raymond, you and I both know the best person to clean out your stuff is you, and you just got to be disciplined to do it. And so when you do pass away, there's less that they have to go through. There's going to be enough anyway, but don't just don't leave all your piles of stuff just around to figure out. You can sort through it faster than your kids can.
Yeah. Or, also have it where to say, what, I mean, I did that with, my parents, is that there are things to say, when you die, I would like this, or if you'd like to contribute sooner, that's fine. So I got furniture, I got watches, I got cufflinks, I got things. I even sometimes actually when I friends that I like to say, look, I admired this. I would like something personal from you, a hat, a handkerchief, something.
Yeah.
And is it inappropriate? I don't think so. I would be honored if somebody says, "Hey, I saw this, and it's meaningful to me. So if it isn't something to some other family member, I would like to have this. Why not?"
Your old fishing pole in the garage. It's just
Exactly.
you went
Yeah.
fishing with it with your dad, 30 years ago.
Well, interesting you say that because my wife had her father was an outdoor writer and photographer and very prominent. In fact, he his fame was really he was on Miller Lite
Oh,
commercials.
nice.
Yeah, and so we actually have some Grits Gresham fishing poles along with his books. So yeah, you bring up yeah we have fishing poles. We also have a lot of outdoor sports equipment from him.
Yeah, it's funny the kind of things that are important to your kids that you would not even imagine. The one thing I remember that when my dad passed away that my 3 sisters thought was the coolest was they all kinda wanted the pencil sharpener from the office because they remember as kids sharpening their pencil before it hit the school.
The one on the wall where you we
Right. One of those.
yeah.
So, anyway, well, thank you so much for your time today. Raymond, if someone wants to get a hold of you, can you give us repeat kind of information and so people can get a hold of you if they'd like to.
The best way is the two-way conversation. Two five My phone number is area code 253-275-6091, or the website www.lavineltcins.com. But there's more. Uh, a website is a one-way conversation. However, two things. In the upper left of my website, it will be there is a site you can go to that will if you put in your lifestyle, it'll also say what your longevity might be, and also the cost of care. 'Cause some people are visual rather than saying caregiving. What's a caregiving? Because
Right.
you need to see a movie or something that talks about caregiving where somebody can so you can visually see not only just caregiving and your longevity. In other words, when you're at that point, you're between transitioning from real reasonably good health to warning lights to eventually dying. It's that period, and then what the cost of care, and then for people to visualize to say, look, do I really have enough money that I can self fund this, or maybe it's worth spending a small percentage of my income to own a plan that will really provide not only the caregiving benefits, so that I can spend the rest of my money on my lifestyle. If you go to the lower right of my website, rather than the 46 frequently asked questions that and usually how much does it cost and when do I need it,
Yeah.
it you can put in all that stuff. You can even put in who's Raymond Lavine, and it will give you, yeah, because I'm enough on social media that it'll have all kinds of things. So if you want to find out whether I really know what I'm doing in this, but you can also put in all kinds of questions that are not let me say it this way. They're your questions that will answer, your way. And in most situations, it may not be the perfect answer, but it will give you, I think, a reasonably good explanation. You were talking about, you have had podcast guests that have talked about artificial intelligence, and, what's good about it and what eventually will be improved. So you can go to the upper left or the lower right to get a lot of information, so that if you were so disposed to say, gee, I think should at least have the conversation, whether with me or somebody else, that you'll have enough information to say, at least have the conversation.
Yeah, anything you can do to make it easier for your kids and your family to have to clean up after you. That's a common courtesy you can do as well. So make a plan.
It's more than just it's a responsibility.
Right.
It's a responsibility, and it's a covenant that a covenant that you have with your family. What are you going to do for each other?
Right. Right. So anyway, just thanks for your time today. And parting words of advice, I would, is probably get your life in order. And if you think you have a long-term plan, review it if you haven't looked at it in 10 years. But think about all the ways you've had to help your parents in their later years, and think, okay, how can I learn from that and make the next generation have less to have to do? So learn from what you've had to deal with, and make it better for your kids. And that'd be, I think, a good departing thought. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Fountain of Vitality podcast. Head to fountainofvitality.com for more episodes, insights, and resources. Remember, your health is yours to own. Take charge, focus on what you can control, and keep exploring what works for you. Always be your best self, lift others, and trust the compass of wisdom. Until next time, stay vibrant and take care.